Hey guys, so this is a video that's been inspired by my recent game of Spectre operations. It was actually that's my probably third game that I've played. I've been through the rules extensively, as you can see with these tabs, to get ready for my scenario that I have put together called the War on Drugs. But as you will see in the title of this video, as I've played this game more and more, and this is the first edition, so which I assume is what most people have. If you have the second edition, then a lot of this won't apply because they've changed a lot of it, and I really don't intend to get the second edition. But as far as the first edition goes, I've watched a lot of battle reports, and I think every single one I've watched was wrong. Every single one I watched was played wrong. Now, let me say this. You can house rule a game any way you want, right? But I think you should at least say, if you're going to call it a battle report, we've house ruled this or we've house ruled that, so that people watching it know that's not the way the game is designed to be played. It's just the way you prefer to play it. One of the things that I've noticed, though, with a lot of these channels that have done the Spectre Operations battle reports, and there's not many, to be honest with you, there's only maybe 4 or 5 channels that have done them, is they will play over and over and over again and repeat the same mistakes, right? They don't refer to the rules a lot of times during the game, and then apparently they don't refer to the rules after the game to say, hey, what did we do wrong? What did we get wrong? So I'm going to go through the most common mistakes I've seen in this game, so that if you pick it up, if you're interested in it, if you hear about it, even if you get the second edition and that rule hasn't changed, you will have a better footing of right off the bat, well, it doesn't work that way. And it's because it says it right in the rules. Now, this isn't me interpreting the rules. This isn't me saying it makes more sense to do it this way. This is me reading what the rule says and applying it. And I think most of the people doing it wrong aren't ignoring the rule per se, as much as they have forgot, or it slips their mind, right? And so they just play their games, and once they're used to playing it, they play it the same way over and over again. So I'm going to go through these. These aren't in any particular order. They're just on the top of my head now, and I want to put them out there for you guys and maybe for myself in the future. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning. Let's work our way from the front of the book to the back. All right, so we have our contents, our introduction. We get to things here where they talk about realism, and that's kind of important in these rules, especially because a lot of the ways that I'm seeing the games played, there isn't any realism. I've seen games where one side has 6 special operators going against 40 insurgents, and they may lose one guy and they win the game. They just blowing up massive amounts of insurgents, just wiping them out. And I'm like, man, this is kind of silly. And when I first saw these playthroughs before I had the rules, I really was very negative on the game, right? If you listen to some of my videos when I was doing my Black Ops, I said, I've seen Spectre Op rules and I don't like them because they look phony, right? You had these guys with just 4 or 5 special operators just mowing through people like a Van Damme or a Steven Seagal movie. Now, of course, the rules say realism. So let's just take it from that thing that we have in here. So one of the things they say, the points value is included as a guide only. We would rather you agree a realistic scenario with your opponent and enjoy kitting out your force and playing it well planned up. Well, that's baloney. I'm sorry. To say the points values is a guide only is baloney, and agree to a realistic scenario is baloney, right? Because in reality, the United States has such vast firepower and assets at its disposal, you could never play, quote, a balanced game or balanced scenario. So who wants to be the guy on the other end, of an F-16 attack or a stealth fighter attack, right? Or a Tomahawk missile attack, right? Who wants to be on the other end of that in a, quote, game? So the points value are the points values. Now, I kind of know why they put that in there, because I think a lot of the points values in here are kind of very lopsided. But let's keep going. Great pictures. So we get to our stats. Now, modifiers, alertness, unalertness. So far I don't see much that has been a big thing to me. We get to our levels. Now, this is one thing in the rules is not so much I see people getting wrong. It's just something I'm not sure why it's here. So, for example, here they say level 4 is 4 to 6 is considered trained. But there's nowhere in the game where any of these levels have anything to do with anything. As far as I see. I mean, it says it has 12 levels, but you're either trained or you're professional. There's not a trained level 4 that I see. So maybe that's for future rules. But these are important. You know, trained, professional, elite, they will play differently. So let's keep going. So we get to our profiles. Now, one of the most important things, and I think one of the first mistakes I've seen when people play this game is, so in this profile, you are looking at an elite commander, and he will cost you 30 point values. An elite team leader will cost you 20 point values. An elite operator will cost you 20 point values. Now, if you look at this chart, they have no equipment, right? They have nothing with them. So you're paying 30 points for him alone. And I think in a lot of the games I play, they buy the elite commander for 30 points and then deck him out with all kind of goodies and all kind of garland and Christmas wreaths, and they don't pay for the points. Right? If you get an elite commander for 30 points, any of their equipment you must pay for. And that's going to be very important down the line. So let's keep going. Okay. Drift and direction templates, area of effect, turn sequence. Okay. Now, the first turn sequence we're going to deal with is initiative. Now, the most common mistake I see people make in initiative is, so let me explain how initiative works. So in the game, you roll for your initiative and you add your command stat for your commander. Now, obviously, if you're playing an elite commander, his command is 6. And if you're going up a militia, the militia commanders is a 4. So what most people do is, let's just say the elite is the blue die. So he's a 6 plus 5, he gets an 11. A 6 plus 4 is a 10. And he says, oh, well, I win the initiative. Right? And they do it again the next game. Oh, he's a 6 plus 6 is a 12. 6 plus 4 is a 10. I win the initiative. Next time. 6 plus 1 is a 7. 2 plus 4 is a 6. I win the initiative. So you're starting to see what happens is that the elite players are almost always going to win the initiative if they have a command 6 elite player. But the mistake most people make is the initiative is affected by the amount of suppression that you have on your force. So it says the suppression inflicted on the player's force during the previous turn is totaled and applied as a negative modifier to the next following initiative phase score. This can lead to negative initiative score results. So when you are rolling for initiative, if you are the special forces and you have 4 suppression on you, and let's say you're the insurgents, and let's say you have no suppression because all your guys were killed, they weren't suppressed. Well, when you roll, he minuses 4 now, so that becomes a 1. Your 4 plus 2 is 6. He's 6 plus 1 is 7. So he would still win the initiative, but if you had a 3, you would now win the initiative. So the suppression is very big, and that is probably the biggest area I see mistaken when people play this game, is they blow off or ignore the suppression, right? And if you do that, you are going to mess the game up, because suppression is very big in this game. It affects your initiative, and it affects a whole lot of other things. So remember, the initiative score is affected by the amount of suppression, and it's both sides. If they had 2 suppression, 2 would come off of this. If they had 4 suppression, 4 would come off of that, right? And so you have to remember that. Now, we go to the command phase. So we deal with command test and command actions. So basically, if you want to do a command action, you roll a D6 score, and it's whether it's going to be equal or below the command statistic. Now, again, a lot of people don't realize your command statistic is affected by what? Suppression. So if you have suppression, it is a -1 modifier to your command statistic. And again, you may not see people remember that. So it says here, each point of suppression carries a -1 penalty to movement, shooting, close combat, and command. So if you have 3 suppression on a commander, his command will go from 6 to 3, which means it's going to be a lot harder for him to pass command checks if he is suppressed. If you ignore the suppression, he's almost always going to pass his command checks. So again, suppression affects your initiative. Suppression affects your command checks. The only thing suppression doesn't affect, that I can tell, is your defense, which is only 2. I don't think there's any character or profile that has a higher defense than 2 starting out. I don't even think elites get higher than 2. And that's the number that you do the roll off against. So elites have a 3. Everybody after elites is 2, and then untrained civilians are basically 1s. Suppression does not affect your defense score. But your defense score is affected by wounds and casualties, which is another area of mistake. So we go from initiative, we go to our command test. So let me see here. We have our overwatch, scanning, breakdown, squad leaders, command leaders, and so forth. Another rule as far as breakdown goes, unless you are elite, you must always have 2 people in a group, and they must be in cohesion, right? So if you are breaking down, elite can go alone. They can travel on their own. But otherwise, even if you are rangers or whatever, marine recons, those are all professionals. They must be in groups of 2, at least 2 people, if you are breaking down. Okay, so that gets us through the command phase. We now go into the tactical actions, which is movement, difficult terrain, climbing, moving with captives, unconscious or casualty models, moving through flames. So most of this, I haven't seen a lot of mistakes. There's our rules on squads and cohesion, losing cohesion. There are tactical actions, combat sprint, tactical movement, move into close combat. So I don't recall seeing too many things on there. You have breaching actions, movement detection. So we are going to go past all of that, and now we're going to go to shooting. So this is the second biggest mistake that I've seen. And part of this, I will say, has to do with some of the rules, because the rules are very unclear with this whole range interval idea, which I still do not know anything about how this range interval is supposed to work. I'm sorry. Because they say here your range interval is the interval of the weapon's range, but you have 7 bands, which means if you have a pistol that shoots 8 inches and you multiply that times 7, well, I don't know, what is that, 640 inches? 7 times 8? 5 times 8 is 40, plus another 16 is 560 inches. That's impossible. Right? There's no way a pistol would have a range 7 band. So as far as this goes, that is, to me, that's totally useless. But The one thing about suppression, the one thing about the firing thing that I go is, so you do a targeting roll, right? And so if you are an elite and your shooting score is 6, right? So you roll a die, you add your score to your die roll. So 6 plus 5 would be an 11. Your opponent rolls a die and adds his defense. So basically, even if he rolls a 6, if his defense is 2, he has an 8, he can't beat your 11, right? So what I see most often that is wrong is the guys will calculate it and say, oh, well, I'm a 6 and I've got +3 for my laser and my red dot and my scope. So that makes me a 9 and you're just a 2 defense. So even if you roll a 6, the best you could get was 8. So you can't beat my roll, right? You can't beat my roll. So, you automatically take the hit. Now, that may be true, right, when it comes to automatically being hit. But the inverse is not true when it comes to whether somebody can automatically not be hit. So yes, you can calculate the roll and say, oh, well, you automatically are going to get hit. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But you cannot calculate it and say, well, you can't hit me, so you might as well not roll. Let's go to the next figure. And that is the second biggest mistake I see in the game. Because the reason it is a mistake is whether or not your opponent can hit you or not, they are still entitled to fire and shoot at you. Because every time they shoot at you, you will take a point of, you guessed it, suppression. Right? And so the way this really affects the game most is, say I have a special operator, right? And I'm closing in on, 3 jihadis, right? And I've got my M4 trained on them with my scope, and I'm blasting as I come in, right? Well, say the 3 jihadis all get a shot at me, but they have a terrible shoot value. I've got bulletproof vests, I'm behind some cover, and I tell the other player, well, you can't hit me. I got cover, I got this, and I got that, and even if you roll a 6, you can't hit me. So there's no sense in even shooting at me because you can't hit me. Right? And the guy says, oh, yeah, you're right, I guess I can't hit you, so why don't you do your turn? No. That's not how it works. Doesn't matter if they can't hit you. This guy shoots at you, you take a point of suppression. This guy shoots at you, you take a point of suppression. This guy shoots at you, you take a point of suppression. Don't matter whether they can hit you. Now, the most an elite operator can take, I think, is either 3 or 2. Let me see. Because I know 2. So the most he can take is 2 suppression. The reason that's important, though, is because when it becomes his turn, he is going to suffer -2 from his move value, from his shoot value, and from his command value. Because he has 2 points of suppression. Right? So you have to remember that. It doesn't matter whether they can hit you or not. Right? You have to take the suppression from these shots that are coming in. And so that is one thing I see get wrong all the time, is players just moving on saying you can't hit me. Right? And of course that is going to affect a lot, because if this guy is an elite operator with a 6 shoot value, if you can put 2 suppression on him, he goes down to a 4. So now you might get rid of some of those automatic hits that he had, where he was saying, well, you can't beat me, I automatically hit you. Well, yes, I can. You've got 2 points of suppression on you. And remember, when the next initiative phase comes, he's still going to have these 2 points of suppression. So now, on that roll, he suffers 2 less, because he suffers 2 from his roll because he has suppression. If he kills all 3 of these jihadis, your side has no suppression. So you don't have to worry about it. So again, remember that. So we will go on. The next thing we will look at is lethality and casualty rolls. So basically the way lethality works is every weapon has a lethality. You roll the number, I think, or over. So let me just see. Equal or over. So if you have like an M4 has a 4 plus lethality. So I need a 4 or higher. If I roll a 5, you're dead. Like body armor will subtract 1. So basically I need to roll a 6 so that I could subtract 1 and still be over. At least I need to roll a 5. Whatever. But so that is, I think that's pretty straightforward. If you the roll is not lethal, then you roll on the casualty table and you just look it up. And these casualties are not insignificant, right? Because the next area I see wrong with a lot of people is, and I don't think this is intentional, a lot of people will take a casualty and say, oh, he has a let's just see, he's wounded and he has a bleed out in 5 turns. But what they forget is it says you're wounded and your stats are halved, rounding down. Which means your defense now goes from a 2 to a 1. If you have a shoot value of 6, guess what? It just got dropped to 3. If your command is 6, it got dropped to 3. All your stats are halved when you take a wound. Again, if you're simply injured, it says stats are halved. If you have number 1, if you roll a light wound, the lightest wound, stats halved, rounding up. So that's the only difference. On injuries, you round up. On wounds, you round down. But your stats are always halved. And I've seen people say, oh, he only has a light wound. You know, he's about to fire now. He's going to keep moving. He's going to apply a kit. No, your stats are half now. Everything is halved. Your agility, your shooting is all halved. The minute you take injuries in this game, it is serious, right? It is serious. You don't just keep fighting on, you know, like this is Warhammer or something. So remember, all your stats are half no matter what you take. No matter anything you roll on here, your stats are going to be half. That's the best way to remember it. The other thing I see that people have made a mistake with is they will have a guy who takes a casualty. Say our operator takes a casualty. His stats are halved. He has a friend come over. Oh, I got a battle trauma kit. I'm gonna stop your bleeding. Right? And they start moving out again. Bam, he gets hit. He takes another casualty. Right? And he says, oh man, you got to get to me next turn so you can apply another battle trauma kit. You can't do that. The only thing a battle trauma kit does is stop the bleed out. It does not remove that you took a casualty. And the reason that is significant is if you have taken a casualty at any time in the game, if you take another casualty, you are dead. You are dead. It's not if you have a casualty on you when you get hit again. If you take 2 casualties in the game, you are dead. The battle trauma kit does not remove a casualty. It stops the bleed out associated with a casualty. Bleed out basically means in 4 terms, if the bleeding isn't stopped, you're going to be dead. It does not heal you. These aren't healing potions. And so in a lot of the games I've seen, they will do this. I use a battle trauma kit. Guy gets hit. Next turn, he applies a battle trauma kit, and he keeps on fighting. That's not right. That's the way you get six special operators taking out 40 insurgents with AK-47s and heavy machine guns. It's nonsense. It's friggin' nonsense. Okay? And let me read it. If a model is wounded and suffering bleed out, it will be considered dead when bleed out numbers reduced to 0. Okay? Now, let me show you the other thing here. It is recommended to lay a red D6 next to a magic to indicate bleed out. Let's keep going. And I'll show you what I was talking about. Assured lethality. Shooting at a captive or casualty. Now listen. A ranged attack may be made at captive, captor, attending model, or casualty. However, the targeting rail fails to hit the target and the other models hit instead. That's fine. If the ranged attack causes a wound to the target, then the captive can go free. That's not it. Shooting at casualties. Casualties may be shot at as normal, and if the casualty sustains any additional hits, then it is immediately removed as a fatality, regardless of weapon lethality. Let me repeat. Casualties may be shot at as normal, and if the casualty sustains any additional hits, then it is immediately removed as a fatality, regardless of weapon lethality. You can get hit with a pistol. Hit. It doesn't even have to roll for lethality. And if you've already had a casualty in the game, you are removed. This may happen in a single ranged attack where multiple shots were fired from one weapon. Now, the funny thing is most people remember that rule when special forces double tap with a rapid fire weapon. They say, oh, you got hit again, you're dead. But they never remember it when a special forces takes a casualty and 2 turns later he gets hit again. They don't remember to immediately remove him as a fatality, right? And that's exactly what it says. Now, it doesn't say, and here it says first aid. A model may attempt to prevent another that is a bleed-out casualty, which is a special casualty, it's called a bleed-out casualty, from becoming a fatality. It says if you move in contact, you can temporarily staunch the bleed-out. Again, this is something people get wrong. If you are a model and you have a casualty, right, and I'm a model, and I move in contact with you, if I don't have a med kit, the only thing I'm really doing is staunching your wound, right? It does not stop your bleed out and it does not heal your casualty. But what it does is it pauses your bleed out. So remember, moving in contact without a med kit or a battlefield trauma kit does not stop your bleed out. It pauses your bleed out. If I move away to go engage, your bleed out picks up. So if you were at 3 turns, you're about to bleed out, and I get in contact with you, as long as I'm touching you, I can't do anything else. As long as I'm touching you, you stop bleeding out. The minute I head off, you go back ticking down. You go from 3 turns to 2 turns to 1 turn to you're gone. So remember that. That is another thing that people either forget about or mix up. So now we finally come to the main event in this video. The suppression rules.